All right, I'm back again. This is Todd Kuramoto with the Lip Solutions. I'm a regional director of business development, and we're going to begin with just a little brief overview of the company. Promise it'll be only about 5-6 minutes. So, on the first slide, we're going to talk about what we would refer to as our practice in numbers. So, 23 years, what it really means is back in the mid 90s, we started as a company that really helped organizations make ERP decisions. So we did a lot of the requirements gathering. We sent out to viable ERP vendors. We collected and we really helped clients through the whole process of selecting an ERP. What we learned early on was that the individualized development programs are very important, right? So we've been very structured, and all of our consultants, and we have about 45 consultants, are really required to pass at least two certifications per year. So then flash forward 12 years ago, in the year 2006, we decided we were going to ride one horse. And that horse was Dynamics AX at the time. And there are many different versions. We have experience all the way back to the earliest versions back in the late 90s and early 2000s with our consultants, all the way to, of course, Dynamics 365. What it's also interesting is we've been known more on the AX side. In the last year or so, we have gained all the necessary certifications. So we're beginning projects and implementations on the sales side as well. So if you are so inclined and looking at AX really across the board or 365 across the board, just kind of keep that in mind. Not many vendors would kind of promote this one former customer, and it's because of all the failed implementations. We estimate that we have right around 24 of our clients where we came in after the initial implementation really didn't go well. So some call it kind of project recovery, but we're just very, very well, we're just used to hearing those kind of horror stories. And in that case, we mutually walked away. I mean, the client, can't really call them a client, but we're still very, very friendly with them. When we see them at AXUG events, it's not like there was anything spiteful. It was just very different approaches in the way that we operate and our structure and approach and our process versus they as a company. Just really, really different. So on the next slide, I'd like to mention some of the certifications and other things, other competencies. The first thing I'm going to point out is I think we're really unique as a partner that we're also a customer. So to say that we kind of eat the same dog food, pardon that pun, but it's true, right? So all our financials, project accounting, just think of timesheet collections because we have customers who are applying projects, et cetera, to specific clients. We run payroll, so we're truly a unique partner that we do payroll as well. Got a fantastic, generally ROI versus paying a lot of the de facto standards, the ADPs, the Chronoses, et cetera, et cetera. So, but we are gold certified, which just means that we've attained a certain level of achievement, both from a certification perspective, which I mentioned before, as well as revenue. Follow the money, as they say in business, right? So we're also a Microsoft CSP or cloud solution provider. And it just means that early on we were identified and then we went through a kind of a vetting process. So it just means that all the Dynamics 365 subscriptions, additional Azure services, for example, you have things like additional VMs that you might need for development or test or config/build. Those are the things that if they're really provisioned versus on a subscription basis, it just makes a lot of sense. So we can kind of help and guide you as a Microsoft CSP. The certified development partner goes hand in hand with what I mentioned before regarding having requisite certifications that we've passed, especially on the development side. And the last two bullets, Microsoft Managed Partner and Designated Microsoft One Commercial Partner, just means that we have weekly conversations that are set up with an account manager that is designated for the larger partners, Dynamics partners in the channel. And as you know, it's a partner-led channel, so Microsoft's very reliant on partners like Ellipse Solutions. We also mentioned the red carpet programs because we were identified, designated, and invited to the Internet of Things, the IoT red carpet program, as well as the Power BI red carpet program. And as digital transformation continues to evolve and grow, these are the areas that expertise will be required to help guide and manage moving forward. So then on the last slide, I just wanted to point out a couple quick things before handing things over to Kelly. So when we talk about help desk, I think what's really important is we have always provided help desk type services for our implementations, but back, gosh, it's been 6-7 years ago, we saw a gap. And the only way you can really fill the gap effectively is if you do things like you do an initial assessment. And during the assessment, you're jotting down and you go through a discovery to really understand which modules have you implemented, how have you really configured these things, what integrations do you have, what customizations. The point being, we start with this foundational type process to ensure that when we're actually doing, the break fix type support or considering maybe customizations, et cetera, that we really know your system. So we do things as well like a health check where we're comparing how you've really got things configured versus best practices, Microsoft white papers, et cetera. And then we're generating this kind of traffic light type report, red, green, yellow. And it just shows where things may be a little bit out of kilter. And it helps really, truly avoid problems in the future. And then the upgrading to D365 or the concierge program, please understand that in 2006, Labor Day, we had one of the first 30 go lives. And since then, there have been, over 20 platform updates, just umpteen application type updates as well. We've evolved from an overlaying approach to an extensions approach. Extensions has now taken on new meaning because of evergreen/one version, or this continuous update type of architecture that Microsoft is really promoting. Point being is we've learned a lot in the 2.5 years, and we've just developed a very structured approach that we like to refer to as concierge or a white glove approach, because again, we've seen a lot, we've experienced a lot, we understand escalations, and at the end of the day, we just feel like we have the process done to help minimize risk and, of course, also minimize pricing. So on that note, though, I'm going to hand this over to Kelly Kane, who is one of our business analysts, and I'm going to let her introduce herself as well as carry on this webinar. So thank you very much for joining us today. Over to you, Kelly. And you might be muted.
Thanks, Todd. I was. So just want to take a minute to just introduce myself. My name is Kelly Kane. I have 7 years of Dynamics AX and D365 experience. I come from a manufacturing background, 15 years in food manufacturing. I have been actively engaged with the user group community for AX and D365 for the majority of my years within Dynamics. It's a very positive thing, so I recommend that for anybody if you are kind of out there looking for things, looking for answers. That is a great resource and tool. And I'm also a Microsoft MVP. I put my Twitter handle on there. I talk about AX a lot. I talk about Cleveland Indians, some of my favorite sports teams. So you can follow me there. I will promote my own webinars and definitely some blogs and different things that I'm working on. So if you're interested, follow me on Twitter. I'm kind of hilarious, or at least I think I am. All right, let's move on to the presentation. All right, so here to talk to you today about subcontracting in Microsoft Dynamics 365 for finance and operations specifically. It is important to note that these steps can be done in AX 2012 and AX 2009 as well. So anything that we're doing here is transferable. So subcontracting itself is really kind of overwhelming. The information that's out there is really confusing, lacking in content. I've been out there looking and researching and digging in, and ultimately, I've just had to kind of figure this out on my own because Microsoft doesn't offer very good information. Sorry, Microsoft. The information is just not out there. So, what I'm really hoping to do today is to help break down some of those barriers and let you know why and how we would use subcontracting in Dynamics 365. Of course, we only have a limited amount of time together, so I'm going into this as kind of a 200 level course. Got a few prerequisites going into this. It's going to assume that you have knowledge of BOM and route setup. We're not going to go into really deep dive in that, really more of a high level detail on that type of information. Now onto our agenda. I'm going to give a brief overview of why subcontracting might be used in a manufacturing environment. This is specifically for manufacturing, by the way. Subcontracting can be used in other ways within the application. However, today we're really focusing on manufacturing. We're going to go discuss BOM setup, difference between service and production items, or just items. And then we'll review routes and their importance to the subcontracting space. Lastly, we're going to wrap up with a really quick overview of costing and what that's going to look like with a subcontracted item. So why subcontracting? There are many benefits of subcontracting. The most important to a company being cost-driven, of course. There are other reasons for subcontracting as well, such as load balancing, the need for specialized equipment or resources, or a certain type of outside expertise that may be needed. You can use your imagination. I'm sure if you're in manufacturing, there is a use case scenario for you to be using subcontracting. Let's think of a few examples just off the top of our heads. We have a lot of experience in plastics and paper manufacturing at Ellipse Solutions. So let's say you're a plastics manufacturer. There might be a case where you need to send a sheet of plastic off to receive extra lamination at an outside facility. Likewise, paper manufacturers might need to send off a roll of paper to be cut to an odd or specific size that they maybe just don't have the tools for. Lastly, you can send off a pallet of finished goods for special wrapping or stacking. That might be for like a promotional event for your customer. They might require a specific configuration for the duration of their event that maybe your equipment can't handle. Therefore, you would send it out to an outside contractor for load balancing or labor constraints and using their specialized equipment or manpower just for this. All right, so let's get down to it. There are going to be a few more slides in this presentation, but to be honest, I'm more of a visual and a hands-on learner, so I'm going to show quite a bit of demos throughout this webinar. Just wanted to kind of get that out there up front. So let's talk a bit about BOMs, and then we're just going to jump right into it. Okay. There are a couple of schools of thought out there on the internet in that wide, vast, expanse of knowledge, just about how to set up BOMs in subcontracting. Some people say to only use service items, but I have found that Dynamics 365 for finance and operations allows for both the use of service items and items. Service items being intangible and your items being tangible. I've actually written a blog series about this that is forthcoming on the Ellipse Solutions website that's going to dig a little bit deeper, so keep an eye out for that. Let me show you real quick how to get there. Okay, so here's the Ellipse Solutions website. It's a pretty cool website. Right up here at the top, right next to all of our social medias, you can see blogs. Here you have Dynamics 365 and AX blogs. We have Dynamics 365 CRM blogs, Azure Cloud Services, Talent, Payroll, and HR, Power BI, Plastics Manufacturing, Field Service. So basically, those are just tags for the blogs. But we're going to go to the Dynamics 365 and AX blogs. So definitely keep an eye on this. There's a lot of good content here written by our business analysts. So keep that in mind. Okay. So back to services. Being intangible as they are, they're typically something that's being done that you want costed within your production process. For example, the stacking of the pallets or the cutting of the paper roll. When you create a service item for this purpose, you're going to want to set it up as an item for purchase. This will add it to a production or to a purchase order and allow you to cost it out through your AP module. When you're adding it to a BOM, you will add a vendor to the BOM, and the purchase order that is generated will always make reference back to the original production order that generated it. It's really cool. Likewise, with an item or a tangible item over here, that can be created for purchase or production. I've used both, and they both work theoretically. The purchase order will account for the work that the vendor has done in a more effective manner, going through the AP module and making sure that it's costed and hits the vendor appropriately. But let's say you have a contract set up and you pay a set rate every month to this vendor. You don't necessarily want to use a purchase order. You can set it up through an additional production order. That will be executed on your end, so you're going to actually have to finish that production order so that the costs and everything will flow through and that the references will be made. But you definitely can do this. Maybe a little confusing, but it is doable. That is also covered in my forthcoming blog series. Now, I do want to mention, this is directly from the Microsoft website, that there is currently no method for semi-finished items in D365 for finance and operations. In order to manage this process, it would require a massive undertaking of following multiple items through the system, creating multiple production orders. For a production order that requires more than one operation in order to transform raw materials into a finished good, the finished good is posted back into inventory only in the last operation. The semi-finished products that the earlier operations produce are counted in work in progress or WIP, but they aren't posted or tracked in inventory. So although you can split the routes and bills of materials into multiple smaller units, this approach will increase the number of products, BOMs, and routes that must be managed. So this can get really complex really quick. And you'll see that when we're looking at that in a minute. I've got a very simple example to kind of show you how this works, but this can get out of control pretty quick. All right, so let's jump into our demo environment. All right, here we are. We are going to go to our release products. We are actually in our release products right now. Managed to get there through the hamburger menu here. You can see the different modules as they're set up. You've got product information management, which is where I went, and went to release products. All right, so the product that I'm working with today is D0006, or the speaker solution. So we're going to look at this item. Really, what we're looking at now is the BOM. So I'm going to show you a little bit about our BOM. I'm going to go to our active BOM versions. And this item takes advantage of configurations. So there are multiple configurations of this item, but the one that we're specifically looking at today is going to be configuration 80. BOM 65 is the BOM that is attached to that, and you can see a little bit more about it. So when we scroll down to the bill of material lines, you'll see that there are two items on the BOM. We have T0001, which is a speaker cable, and then you've got D0006, D0004, which is a high-end speaker. So this high-end speaker is actually what we are looking at as far as sending off to a vendor and getting that made externally. So we're going to go here, look at the BOM a little bit closer detail. You can see that this is the active BOM. Inventory, see inventory that's available, purchase, and plan. All right, so let's go into our bill of material lines now. We have item D004 that is set up within this. And if you look, the default order type that's listed is purchase order. So we are wanting to make sure that this is set up to purchase. If I go to purchase, the default vendor is set up as US 101. US 101 is a Fabricam electronics. So basically what I'm saying here is that when we create a production order for the main item, or D006, our speaker solution, this high-end speaker here, we have to send a purchase order off to that vendor so that they can create that in order for us to finish this product. Now, let's go see what that looks like in production. So I'm actually going to go into production control here, and I'm open all production orders. I actually have a couple of these started and ended, but if we're going to create a new production order right here, go to D006, our speaker solution. We're going to go to our configuration. Remember I said 80 is our configuration. I'm going to install our active BOM and route. And then we're going to click create. We're going to create, this is just for one. And I'm going to click the estimate button. I want to show you guys what happens here with the BOM. Estimated, go up to our BOM details in production. And you can see that it has estimated out for me that I need one speaker cable and one high-end speaker. But if you scroll over to the right, you're going to see that there is a reference to a purchase order here, the vendor account, and a PO number. So this has already created a purchase order for us to see through the production process. Let's go check that out real quick. Let's look at our accounts payable module. Look at all purchase orders. Okay, I'm going to sort this here. And you can see that here it is, that purchase order 153 for Fabricam Electronics. That is our vendor that we're working with on this. And we're expecting a delivery date of 2/19. So this is automatically generated. It's kind of like master planning, but a little cooler. All right, so you can see that there is a one item number for D0004. Quantity of one, unit price of $1,068.77. Pretty high-end speaker there. I'm going to go to the purchase order up here. I'm going to confirm this. Because I agree, that is what needs to happen. All right, now let's go back to our presentation and talk for just a bit about routes. All right, so in case you aren't familiar, Routes are used to describe the order of operations, define the operations required, define the time required for those operations, and define how the cost is calculated for each operation. So basically, it's just walking through your process. Help you schedule, kind of figure out how long something is going to take and how much it's going to cost you internally. So routes, they can be either simple or complex. As you can see in this diagram here, we have a simple route. Basically, it's going to follow a sequential process, just has one starting point. You have 4 steps within the process, and it's just going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, complex routes, they can really kind of go all over the place. Like here is a complex route with multiple starting points. You can see here that you're starting here, you're starting here. You also have these 2 that start at the same time. And here is a complex route that has parallel operations. These are operations happening at the same time. So while we start once here at 10, move to 20, we have 3 parallel operations that need to be costed and considered for time and rate when we get to the 30 process here, finishing it up at 40. Now, due to the nature of subcontracting, I would venture to say that most route setups are going to be complex. You might want to set up a parallel process where your vendor is creating a part for your production order. You might want to set up a sequential process where your vendor repackages your pallet of product. So basically you're saying, I'm creating the process, or I'm creating the product, I send it off to the vendor, they send it back to me for us to ship. Other examples might include a complex process where you have multiple start points with multiple products being generated through the process. For example, like a component for the speaker that isn't needed until we reach the 3rd step in the route. That can be started with the first processes, but it has to be received and in inventory in order for us to run and complete the production order. So just like the BOM, you want to set up your route as route type vendor. This will allow your route operation to be accounted for on the production order with the cost you have assigned that your organization puts toward the subcontracted work, allowing you visibility into how much would be spent using a subcontractor or allowing the work to happen in-house. You can set up multiple routes and cost them out to see whether or not subcontracting would benefit your organization. Sometimes it is a must-have, and to do the work required would mean massive modifications to your environment. So you wouldn't even consider it. Ultimately, it's your process, and you know it better than I do. Let's go ahead and jump back into our demo environment and look at routes. Okay, we're going to go back to our item. Product information management, release products. And here it is, our speaker solution. You can actually access the route from up here in the engineer tab. So I'm going to click route. And you can see that there are multiple routes. Route number 51 was the one within our 80 configuration that we were looking at. And the way we have it set up here, we have 3 processes. We have a primary and a secondary 1 process, these 2 running at the same time. So this is a complex route, but you might notice that there's no runtime set up for the secondary route. That is because if we go to our general tab, you'll see that the route type is set up as vendor. So it's not counting this within our scheduled process time. So basically, what I'm saying is if I'm scheduling something internally, I want to count runtime for trimming and cutting and packing, but not this assembly piece that's going on right here. That's what I'm considering for my high-end speaker. Now, if we go back to our production order, kind of check out what's going on when we look at the route explosion after it was estimated. You can see that it's saying the exact same thing here. It's saying we've got a runtime of 1, process quantity of 1. We're still getting a process quantity of 1 here, just no runtime. And then packing, it comes back for packing. So you've definitely got some things here that you can work with. Like I said, this is just a very simple example. Okay. Another thing I wanted to show you is a really, really cool page within the production control module called Subcontracted Work. It's under Operations. And this is where you can actually see your production order, the purchase order that is linked to it, and the vendor account of where it is going to go. So you can have multiple things going on, and while the process sounds extremely overwhelming, there is a place in Dynamics 365 where you can go and see the different pieces that are tied together and what still might need to be done. Because in order to finish the production order, you're going to have to go in and receive this purchase order. Okay, let's take a few minutes, talk a little bit about costing. So costing and subcontracting. Due to the nature of everything being tied together, it can be easy to follow the references and get a true idea of what the costs really are. My examples within the Contoso test data aren't very robust, but D365 can be easily set up to account for anything that you wish to cost against. One of my favorite reports for this is the cost estimates and costing report. You can actually break it down and see what's happening within the system. Now, I'm going to show you an example of this. I've actually got it set up here, and I exported it as well because it was taking a little while to run earlier. But this is one that I did earlier, a production P213. It is ended. This had a purchase order against it. You can actually see our high-end speaker here has a cost of $1,068.77. If you remember, that is the cost that was on our purchase order that was generated. So you can actually break down all the costs. You can look at our route process. We've got speaker assembly workers, got costs associated with it. Everything breaks down at the end and lets you know exactly how much it's going to cost, estimated and total when it's all said and done when you complete your process. Pretty cool process. If we go back to our production order, we can see that it's estimated here. If we release it, and we start it, you can go through the whole process of creating your production. When you go to report as finished, we're going to get an error message. And this error message is telling us that we've got some jobs out there that need to be closed out, but it's also letting us know that our purchase order needs to be received in order for this process to be completed. Because remember, that high-end speaker, that's a big part of what we're doing. So you need to really make sure that you're considering all aspects of this. You won't be able to close your production order unless your purchase order has been fully received and actualized in inventory in your system. Now, let's go back to our cost estimates and costing report real quick. Just want to kind of show you guys that again. This is a really good report. Allows you to see every bit of what's going on within the system. And it gives you that view into all of the costs, including your purchasing costs. Now, if we were to add more to our purchase order, that would come into this as well. So it would be tied back to this purchase order or production order. Well, too many P's. Now, if I look back again at our let's just go back here and enter purchase orders from here in accounts payable. All right. Just want to show you guys where there is a reference on this purchase order to our production order. So there's a lot going on here. You see our configuration 80, and here we have item reference to the production line. Our reference number is our production order. So everything is tied together within the system. And ultimately, that's it for my demo. I was not going to go through the and break down the actual production steps because it does take a while, and I didn't want to do that. I really wanted to save some time for questions and maybe get everybody out a couple minutes early for lunch. So